Welcome back everyone, Oz here, and today I've got some RPG horror stories for you all. As per usual, I'll be narrating the post, giving you my opinions at the end, and I hope you do the same down in the comments down below. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Slight Delivery 7319. Player does not engage with a story, but in such a dramatic way, I can't help but be impressed. I was running a superhero game a few years ago. It was a break from my usual campaign and I wanted to involve the DM. They played a duo of a shapeshifter and a strongman that we will respectively call Bella and Bitey. You'll soon see why. Bella and Bitey started making their name in the city, fighting supervillains, gang members, and foiling bank robberies, the usual fare. After a battle, they find a burner phone ringing in the alley. Bitey picks it up and answers. On the other end, there's a clearly modified voice that congratulates them on the job and wants to meet them, offering them some leads for their investigation. Bitey breaks the phone and throws it away. Bella is kind of flabbergasted by this, as it was clearly a quest hook. Bella was the DM after all. But Bitey tells them it's what his character would do since he doesn't trust people, especially mysterious voices on the phone. Which is fair, but if people in the superhero genre did reasonable things, we wouldn't have comic books. After a while, our team fights a new superpowered gang, save a hospital from a villain with time-stopping powers, meet a Commissioner Gordon analog to help them, figuring that it would be a better appreciated quest hook. And it was, but I had to find a way to at least wrap up that previous plotline since Bitey wanted to know at least what the deal was. It was supposed to be a rogue superhero working against the government and make some kind of authority-like super team, by the way. Bitey finds another phone, and this time Bella wants to answer, but he insists upon it. Before the voice can even say anything, Bitey goes into a tirade about how he doesn't like being followed and he would crush him the next time he called. He then proceeded to eat the phone, describing very loudly how he was chewing on it and making a dull crunching noise. Bella is, again, surprised at this, since even the player said he wanted to know who he was. Bitey says that this is all a ploy to draw him out in the open if he really wants to talk. After yet another mission in which they infiltrate a nightclub ran by a clairvoyant, this time our mysterious wannabe backer calls Bitey on his own phone from a private number. The moment he recognizes who it is, Bitey actually breaks his own phone, tears out the SIM, and then eats it. And that was the end of the plotline in the campaign shortly after due to scheduling issues. I have never seen a plot hook refuse so thoroughly. I could have used another way of contacting them, true, but on the other hand, I don't know if Bitey would have tried to eat a messenger or a carrier pigeon. I do not want to know. So I don't even know how I would personally handle a player that's doing this, because normally when someone's doing just what their character would do, normally I can just attach realistic consequences to it in order to kind of stop that behavior. Like, oh, it's just what my character do. Well, yeah, but the townspeople would probably end up doing this, so, now you have to deal with that. And normally that kind of shapes that behavior out of them a little bit, and they learn that, just because my character might do this, they might also do something else. But I don't know what I would do in a situation where a character is, refusing a plot hook like this, because they're not... I just don't know how I would, attach consequences without just directly asking the character, hey, would you mind maybe not, playing your character the way that you are just for a little bit so we can proceed with the story? Thanks. Because that's kind of meta and immersion breaking and not as fun. But I also suppose the DM probably could have found more ways to try to introduce the plot hook in a way that wouldn't be immediately, consumed by Bitey. I don't know. For the more experienced DMs in there, what do you think? Is this something where the DM should have kind of worked around it, or is this something where they should have had a conversation with the player, or do you have previous experience that might actually dictate a better solution? Because I have never had to deal with a player that does this. And by this, I mean specifically Bitey in this circumstance. I've dealt with plenty of players that play the whole, it's just what my character would do kind of thing when they use it as an excuse to be an asshole. But this is... I don't know. This is a bit weird. Okay, Cuckoo27. D&D player attacks a DM after dying in game. This happened a few years ago at our DM's house. He was hosting an apocalyptic campaign set in Middle-earth, but with a very loose connection to actual Tolkien lore. I remember I was playing a drow barbarian from the ruins of Mordor, for example. The asshole in question was playing as a human wizard. He was actually DM's sister's boyfriend at the time. She was playing with us. I never was crazy about him, but he seemed somewhat normal until we started playing. At which point he got super competitive and self-important. His character had to be more important than everyone else's, especially DM's sister. She was an orc cleric. I remember, for an example, the party being sent to an eastern city-state called Izanor to investigate the rise of a new Dark Lord, and he monopolized 80% of the dialogue with NPCs and would remind the party that he was the leader of this investigation because the wizard always leads the party in Middle-earth. And any NPC, of course, who reminded him that he is not a Meyer like Gandalf, basically the DM's way of keeping his ego in check, would get either harassed, murdered, or even, in one case, he attempted to commit sexual violence on an NPC who told him to fuck off and that he was not a true wizard. DM stopped him and warned him that there would be none of that in his campaign. He didn't argue, but did shit-talk the DM and claimed he was busting my balls and not letting his character be authentic and denying my player agency. Just real quick, buddy, if your player agency is sexually assaulting people, then you should probably go to therapy. The final session with him, and of this campaign unfortunately, was when we did find the Dark Lord and confronted him. We as a party overestimated our strength, which was our fault. This led to everyone but DM's sister and another player, Hobbit Barbarian, dying. This includes DM's sister's boyfriend, who raged at the DM for allowing us to even fight such a high-level enemy just to be killed. He said, "You knew what we were up against and killed off most of the party. Piece of shit, DM." And then accused the DM of doing all this just to kill him off because you couldn't handle my character. And then bizarrely claiming you can't handle the fact that I'm balls deep inside your sister every fucking day, you jealous ass bitch. DM was obviously also getting angry at this point and telling him what a baby he was being, and he kept yelling at DM as me and DM's sister try to calm him down. He then tells DM's sister, "Shut the fuck up." And then DM got in his face and said, "Don't you ever talk to her like that." And then he punched DM in the face and knocked him to the ground and started strangling him. His sister was freaking the hell out and Hobbit Barbarian was trying to pry him off, and then I threatened to call the police on him. And that's what got him to stop. He got up in my face for a second and then just stormed out. We all check on the DM and he was okay. His sister insisted he get checked out by a doctor, so he did and was fine medically. The shitstain called DM's sister to try to apologize, but kept making excuses about how DM was apparently trying to provoke a fight. But she was done with him, and told him she never wants to see him again, so he started raging at her and saying that she never stood by him, and then started making disgusting suggestions about her having sex with the DM. She blocked him, and I have no idea what they did in terms of legal action or if that psycho ever called again, but that game kind of got soured and we never finished it. We ended up playing D&D again about a year later with a new setting and characters, and we're all still friends. It certainly sounds like the player in question has a lot of psychological issues that he's got to work through, because the implications of him immediately assuming any close, brother-sister relationship means they're immediately having sex, and him assuming any kind of jealousy attached to that is honestly very telling of where his brain goes and how, far gone he might be in some areas. It's also really unfortunate that a lot of players that do try to do some fucked up shit like sexually assaulting an NPC then whine about the fact that they're being denied player agency. That's just a pretty gross situation to be put in. Most players are not like that, but out of every 100 or so, you'll end up finding one person who ends up, imposing their own will. But one thing that I do want to talk about with this one specifically is actually kind of a mindset that a lot of new players get into, where they want to be the important character of the story, or they feel like they have to be the leader of the party or some kind of important character to the story, kind of like a video game. It's a pitfall that a lot of new players fall into, and it's okay if you have in the past. Just keep in mind that you're playing a multiplayer game with your friends. A good DM will give every player their own moment to shine and to be important, and it's always also best to allow some of your other party members to also have some time in the limelight and to try to avoid being in a position when you're taking up all of it. As example, interacting with NPCs. Because again, you're playing with people. You're not playing Skyrim, you're not playing The Witcher, you're playing a game with a lot of other people where you guys are forging the story and it's not just about you trying to become the main character or main hero. If you feel I missed anything or you have edge cases or a different way of approaching DMing or playing a character, please feel free to comment below and kind of give your own 2 cents on things. We all play these games differently and that's kind of part of the beauty of it. Random Joseph. Player keeps asking for exceptions but doesn't want to deal with the consequences. Yeah, don't really post on Reddit, but the story had stuck in my mind for a while. I was DMing a 5e game for my friends and we were planning to go through Tales from the Yawning Portal. Most of my players came up with quirky yet fun designs for characters, and I did my best to accommodate their ideas. One of my players, the problem player, wanted to play an artificer with a mechanical pet. That's fine, I thought. However, it was difficult to incorporate into the rules. He wanted to use the spell Tiny Servant, but that was a 3rd level spell which he wouldn't get until he hit level 5. And everyone in the party was starting at level 1. It took a bit of negotiating and talking with the other players on what they're okay with, but we decided to allow him to have the Tiny Servant spell, for the cost of one of his spell slots, which would be refunded should he ever reach level 5. Hint, he did not. The game went on fairly well. Artificer was less a spellcaster and more of a support, but the other players were fine with that. Except Artificer, of course. He complained a lot about how he only had 1 spell slot. He believed it was unfair since it nerfed him as a magic user. Never mind that he was casting a 3rd level spell at level 1. I told him I didn't mind reverting the rule we made on Tiny Servant, but he didn't want to lose his combat pet. Eventually, the party got enough experience to level up, and I told everyone to just take the average roll for their health bonuses. Artificer, though, had another idea. He wanted to roll for his health. I rolled my eyes. Give them a foot, and they'll take a mile. I told him I was ruling we take the average and didn't want to bend the rules a second time for him. He said that it wasn't against the rules as written, that players could roll for their health or take the average, and that since he was an artificer with an 11 in con, he really needed the extra health. I calmly, and probably a little condescendingly, explained to him that allowing him to roll would make things unfair, both for him or for the other players. Besides, he wasn't likely to get more health by rolling. In fact, he only had a 3 in 8 chance to get a higher score. Yet, he had a 1 in 2 chance to get a lower score. We went back and forth for a bit until I relented. Fine, I said, roll for your health increase, but whatever comes up on the dice is what you have to take. Got it? Yeah, I know it's a gamble, but I really need the health. He rolled a 2. I think I'll just take the 5. Nope, you rolled a 2, plus 0 from Constitution, so that's all you're getting. But you let everyone else take the average. As you can imagine, he was not happy with my ruling. We got into another argument over this before he just threw his hands up and stormed out. The next session, I welcomed everyone back and went over their character sheets to make sure everyone had leveled up correctly and hadn't forgotten anything. Nothing seemed to be amiss until I got to the Artificer's sheet. You should have 10 HP, not 13. What do you mean? You rolled a 2 last session. Add that to the 8 from level 1, and with nothing added from Constitution, you should have 10 HP. I didn't roll. You made everyone take the average, remember? I distinctly remember getting into an argument with you about your right to roll. It was at this point that the other players chimed in and told him to stop trying to game the system. He shot back that it was unfair, that he needed the health. He said that we had already taken a spell slot from him, and now we wanted to make things more unfair for him? I told you the price for getting the Tiny Servant spell was one of your spell slots. I told you the price for rolling for your health would be taking whatever comes up on the die. I do not feel these are unfair things to ask, and you agreed to both. You gave me an ultimatum. What else was I supposed to do? Play the game like everyone else? Again, more arguing, until eventually I just asked him to leave. That if this was his attitude, then I didn't want him at my table. The group fell apart shortly after. It sucks because I had a really good time with the other players, but after that whole debacle, everything just felt awkward. Perhaps I should have just let him have those exceptions, but I've done that stuff before and it just leads to one player being way too overpowered compared to the others, which can ruin the fun. Should I have allowed rule of cool? Should I have stuck with the rules and not made exceptions in the first place? Or was this guy just a dickhead? Either way, it's in the past. I hope you guys had fun reading through this though. Rule of cool is a very difficult thing to work with in D&D because having exceptions for a player and making it so that way they have specific things that are tailor-made for their character is pretty much a by DM basis. Some DMs will just simply say, you gotta earn it through your usual traditional leveling, and if it's in the book, you're clear to go. Some DMs might be willing to work with you on building your character in a specific way with making sacrifices. Others might just simply, if it sounds like it's not broken, then go for it. It really depends on who you're playing with and what the party allows, so it really is a case-by-case basis, and also, as the DM, if you're going to allow small modifications to specific attributes like this, you gotta be ready to put your foot down and say no, and firmly put it down to avoid them trying to take a mile when you give them an inch. I actually think that yoinking an entire spell slot is pretty reasonable, especially because he kind of signed up for a not very fun situation with the fact that artificers don't get 3rd level spells until level 9, unless he decides to multiclass. So, that's on him. So yeah, he could have definitely handicapped and crippled himself for one small feature that he would want for his character, and if that's something that he desperately wants to make his character more fleshed out, sure, just accept the consequences that come with it though. But honestly, where Rule of Cool more applies is when a character does a specific action and it's a little shady, but it sounds like it might be a lot of fun, and I like to encourage my players thinking out of the box. I remember I once had a player who wanted to play a combat magician / jester. Granted, he was actually classing into being a monk and that was his main stat category, but he was dressed as kind of like a spooky plague doctor jester. He would carry around a bag of holding, and mid-combat, he would specifically open it and store the enemy items into the bag with a dex check or a strength check, depending on what it was, and steal their weapons mid-combat and disarm them. It was a lot of fun to play with. I really enjoyed it. I thought that was going to be a very fun way to have the campaign go, so I allowed it because it was cool and it was fun. I'm always a big fan of things that aren't traditionally weapons being weaponized in such a flavorful way. And Rule of Cool, I allowed it. Evil tiny wolf. Lived experience, not realistic. A former friend, Jim, has been trying to reconnect recently. I moved away after high school, and now that we're older, he's worried about maintaining his long-distance friendships. I understand the logic, so I was open to talking online, even though it's been a decade since we've seen each other. After learning I had gotten into D&D, Jim got very excited. He's writing a project that he hopes to get published and wanted to know about the characters I've played so he could have an authentic female perspective on the hobby. I had no idea what he meant by that, but he clarified he wanted me to tell him about my characters in as much detail as I wanted to share. I opted to start with my favorite character. I had a human Way of the Open Hand monk that I played in a game that lasted 3.5 years. Took a single level dip into cleric for story reasons rather than optimization, but I have a ton of fond memories of the character and the people I played with for that campaign. I have commissioned a ton of art for this character over the years and had started the description by explaining that she was my favorite character, but he cut me off and said she wasn't realistic to the type of character a woman would play. In spite of the fact that I am a woman and did play this character. So I bit my tongue and told him about my life domain cleric that I played in my most recent campaign. Nope, Jim said that the cleric was a harmful stereotype. Why? Because women being the healer is too tropey. He didn't want to hear about my bard at all because I picked the wrong subclass for it. My warlock was too complicated. I was getting frustrated and asked Jim if he wanted to talk about something else, but he insisted that he really wanted to know what my D&D characters were like. Needed a woman's input for this project of his that he was working on. You got a woman's input, you just ignored all of it. Maybe you could tell me more about the project so I know what you're actually looking for. Or you could tell me about some female characters you already have and I could give you feedback on them. Jim switched topics and told me about his Christmas instead. Talking to Jim about our shared hobby was a nightmare. He didn't want to let me change the subject, but also ignored or dismissed everything I said. I still don't know what this project of his is. But after getting talked over so much, I also don't think I want to read it if he ever does get published. See, I get the feeling that whatever he's writing isn't exactly in good faith because if he actually wanted a female perspective, hearing about a unique character that she was excited about could have been a goldmine for whatever he was writing if it was in good faith. But for him to be dismissive of a bard they played or calling a cleric too tropey, it just makes me wonder what it is he's actually writing. I'd love to hear some theories in the comments because I definitely have no idea what he could possibly be trying to write that would prompt this kind of response from him. Also, if he is into D&D, then if this is his response to hearing that like what a female character plays, then he doesn't play with a lot of women in his D&D circles because like I've seen some pretty goofy characters come out of my female players, including a gym bro kobold. So I don't know what he was looking for. E-Duty, the wholesome horror of Harvey. Seen a lot of absolute horror stories here, this one's a bit different. It was around 2004 to 2005 and I was one of a 5-member weekly 3.5e D&D group. We were all quirky and complicated in our own ways, but the main character of this tale is Harvey. Harvey was our age but was already going bald, had thick dark-rimmed glasses, a porn stash, and spoke with a heavy lisp. I'd met Harvey independently through another friend, which was the same story for 2 of the other guys at the table. Somehow everyone had met or hung out with Harvey at some point, somehow, and I can't quite remember who actually invited him to play. I ended up being Harvey's ride to most sessions. He had no car, and regularly took him to the Biscuitville drive-thru on the way home. Harvey had no money. What Harvey did have, in abundance, were drugs. He was typically pre-blazed when I picked him up and weaved in and out of a comical stupor while gaming. But I don't think his cognizance would have made an issue one way or another. Dice hated Harvey. I can't really think back and remember any time a roll ever went Harvey's way. He ended up playing Barbarians, not because it matched his mental state, but it was the only class with enough HP to survive his luck. Harvey also liked to get into trouble. Lots of trouble. He regularly started fights with NPCs and interrupted big bad evil guy monologues just before we got the information we needed. He chugged undefined potions, charged right into obvious traps, and made everything an out-of-character sex joke. He pretty much did everything a player wasn't supposed to do, but the game was somehow better, and we had a lot of fun with his crazy antics. There was one time he called me from a grocery store to pick him up. This was a new one for Harvey. When I arrived, he was hugging a large brown paper shopping bag like his life depended on it, and his eyes were fully dilated. When I asked if he was okay, he simply shouted back, "I've had 10 bottles of acid!" When we got to the DM's house, Harvey made a beeline for the kitchen. He screamed about his acid intake, then forbid anyone from entering the kitchen. We were all a little worried, but didn't know quite what to do. We figured we'd start the game and he'd make his way to the table when he heard us playing. We're 15 minutes in, and it's Harvey's turn. Harvey shouts, "10 bottles of acid!" again from the kitchen, and the DM takes over playing Harvey's Barbarian until the dude calms down. Another 15 minutes go by, and Harvey finally comes out of the kitchen. He's holding a full plate of freshly baked cinnamon buns and proceeds to offer them to us one at a time as if he were the waiter at a restaurant. He then sat down and played the rest of the night as a slightly more polite, entirely normal version of himself. Until we got to the big bad evil guy. Harvey baited the DM, launching into a monologue after promising never to cut him off again. The DM gets in 5 words before Harvey yells, "I don't give a fuck what you think!" and rolls initiative. A session or 2 later, his absurdity and bad rolls gets my fighter killed and the entire group TPK'd not long after that. As horrible as he could be, he was a lot of fun and I miss him at some of my quieter tables. So, this is a great example of having a player who is kind of just a quirky mess ball of sunshine isn't necessarily a bad thing as long as they're amplifying the experience of the table. Like, someone who is just genuinely a manic mess but doesn't get in the way of others is a very fun person to play with because you never know what to expect. Sometimes it could go badly, like Harvey getting the team killed, but other times it can just be a lot of fun and a lot of gooberness. However, when a player is trying to force like the mania and force just the random bullshit, it definitely comes off as that and just kind of makes the entire party have a group eye roll followed by just dealing and putting up with it. And of course, this kind of behavior really only works in a group that's accepting and tolerant of it and they're not taking it too seriously. There are some groups where even Harvey's just genuine goober antics just would not be accepted, and that's just not the kind of vibe they want at the table. But sometimes, the Harveys will find the groups that jive well with them best and accept them to the table, and everyone ends up having a pretty good time. Even if the Harveys end up showing up tripping beyond belief and for some reason exiting the kitchen with a full plate of cinnamon rolls. Which, now I want a full plate of cinnamon rolls. That sounds actually really good right now. Why is it 3 a.m. and everything has to be fucking closed? God damn it. Hey, welcome to the outro. Don't forget this whole thing is basically brought to you by GamerSupps. If you like caffeine, then I can't recommend GamerSupps enough. Use code Oz at checkout to support the channel. And I do actually use this product. It's replaced all other sources of caffeine for me because I feel good. It doesn't have any of that extra stuff that a pre-workout blend might have. It's with a couple of the extra things to make it so you don't crash as hard. It's good. I like it. Personally, if you really want a good flavor, try the Soda Pressing Pear or even the Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are my personal favorites right now.